Welcome back to MMA Al Dente. I am here to talk about Jose Johnson versus Chad Anheliger. Jose Johnson is 15 and 8 as a pro, 28 years old, and he's got 6 inches of height and 7.5 inches of reach over 36-year-old Anheliger, who is 12 and 6 as a pro. Jose Johnson, this guy is a dangerous fighter, first and foremost. He's got bricks in his hands. He's definitely got the touch. A lot of great knockouts, sudden knockouts for him. He's got serious power. He's also not that bad on the ground at all, despite what his record would indicate. I mean, he's definitely vulnerable on the ground, but offensively, he's no fish out of water. He impressed me in that win over Jack Cartwright on the Contender Series, which featured a lot of grappling, and he was advancing to mount and locking up triangles. And I think Jose Johnson, again, he's no fish out of water on the ground, but he's still vulnerable on the ground. He's got 8 losses, 1 of them via knockout, and 4 of them via submission, and 3 decisions. The one knockout loss comes to Mana Martinez, or Leo Mana Martinez, who was in the UFC, I think, earlier this year, but I believe was cut. Still a dangerous guy. And he lost 4 times by submission. My cat is sitting on my notes, so I have to try to remember. The last 2 come to Damone Blackshear in the UFC a few months ago. Got him with the 3rd twister in UFC history. That was in round 1. And before that, he lost to Levi Moles via rear naked choke. Levi Moles is a guy that could kick some ass in the UFC. He's a very good fighter on the outside. And that's really it as of late. He's got losses earlier on, but those are the last 2 guys to submit him, and the last guy to knock him out, and the only guy is Mana Martinez. And his last decision loss, I believe, comes to Ronnie Lawrence, who is still a UFC fighter despite being injured or dealing with some health issues. But I like Jose Johnson a lot as a fighter because he's a very exciting guy. And again, I think he's deceptively versatile. But I still have a lot of doubts about him. Being finished in 5 of your 8 losses is not too inspiring. And he's a guy who has not really turned a corner and earned that signature victory. But he does have a lot of experience so far, 15 and 8 record. That's 23 fights as a pro and a lot of experience as an amateur. I think he's even got more experience as an amateur. So he's a guy who's seen it all and done it all. But despite that, yeah, he's still got some holes to patch up. His opponent, Chad Anheliger, he is a guy at 36 years old who is a walking comeback. This guy started off his career as a 2-5 fighter. The 2 wins are via TKO. I think one's a doctor stoppage. But all 5 losses are via submission. All 5 of them. Would you continue fighting at that point? I would quit and go to bed, but I'm a quitter. But he is not Chad Anheliger. He kept fighting, won 10 fights in a row, the last 3 or 4 of which were incredible and really showed his grit. And that led into the UFC, where he was winning fights, or won a fight anyway. One fight, but then he lost his last one to Haile Alatang. And I feel like it's no coincidence that it is his first loss that is by decision. It's his first loss in which he wasn't finished, wasn't submitted, and it's at the highest level against Haile Alatang. Not that Haile Alatang is fucking jiu-jitsu master or whatever, but I just think Chad Anheliger is a guy who has patched up holes throughout his career and is a much different fighter than those earlier losses. A lot of times I wonder if those early losses are going to rear their ugly heads, and especially when they're knockout losses. It's something I think will come back. But here I think Chad Anheliger has completely turned a corner. Not to say he can't be submitted. Of course he can. But he's a guy that I don't expect to be submitted. In fact, I think the one thing that would give first would be his knockout, his chin, which, especially in this matchup, is probably, more likely than most. But he's still a guy who hasn't been knocked out, and he's shown to have a lot of great traits as a fighter. Really strong round 3s and like 3 or 4 consecutive fights. Aside from the Haile Alatang fight, even though in that fight, it's not like he was giving up at all. He was still trying till the very end. But before that, he took out Jesse Strader in his UFC debut, got a round 3 finish. I thought he lost round 1 and won round 2, but I wouldn't say it's like a comeback victory, but he got a round 3 finish. Before that, he had a comeback win over Muin Gafarov, who's in the UFC now. Guy's a very good fighter, and Chad Anheliger outlasted him. And that was a comeback. He almost put him away and looked really sharp, but Muin Gafarov's very fucking durable. And Chad ended up winning the decision. And before that, he beat Brady Heastand, I believe, was the win before that. And that was a third-round TKO as well. Although, to Brady's credit, he did take the fight on 2 weeks' notice, I believe. Still, Chad Anheliger is there in round 3. And he beat Brady up in round 1, really, to be fair. Uppercutted him to the ground, bloodied his face up. But he was still the guy that was the last man standing. And the fight before that, he fought this guy, Craig McLean. It was much more of a dominant performance, but he still put him away in round 3. My point is, Chad Anheliger has good cardio. He's got grit, and he is a much different fighter than his record would suggest. Even at this point, with a 10-fight winning streak, it still looks like he's got some vulnerabilities. I think he's just a totally different fighter. So here, he's a guy who is... He's never been knocked out, and he's fighting a guy who is much more dangerous, young, healthy, incredible reach, incredible height, and as I said, bricks in his hands. The knockouts of Jose Johnson, he's knocked some guys dead with singular strikes. He is definitely a threat here, but I'm picking Chad Anheliger to survive that threat and take over down the stretch. As you might imagine, or might have guessed from my video here, I'm going to throw a few prop bets on his round 3. I already got one plus 1,800. Submission line I want to see, because I do think that's the most likely way for Jose Johnson to lose. I think this fight is a fight where there are some distinct traits here, and I'm going to play those traits. I'm picking Chad Anheliger, betting on his money line at plus 170, but definitely betting on round 3 finish. And for Jose Johnson, I think I'll look into his round 1 side of things just to maybe hedge, but I don't know about that. Honestly, him winning a decision might even be more likely than actually putting away Chad Anheliger. So if there's anything worth it as a hedge, I'll play it. But really, I'm trusting Chad Anheliger to win this fight, and I'm betting on his money line and his props. Like, share, subscribe, all that horse shit, and check out my other videos.